Hello my friends, my name is Rich and welcome to Greatest Rock and Metal. On Greatest Rock and Metal I talk about what are for me the greatest rock and metal bands, albums and gigs of all time based on my many years of listening to thousands of albums and going to hundreds of gigs. If you enjoy what you see today, please press the red button to subscribe to the channel. It's free, it's easy to do, and I'd be very grateful. Thank you very much. Okay, so today I am going to be featuring the band Def Leppard. One of the most popular rock bands in the world and have had a very long career. I first got into Def Leppard way back in the early 80s. I used to go to this rock and metal disco in Bolton, Lancashire in the UK called Space City. And in fact for a period of time I was a barman there as well. And one of the tracks that the DJ used to play that caught my attention was a track called Bringing on the Heartbreak. But it was also this instrumental part that he played that kind of linked with Bringing on the Heartbreak, which is called Switch 625. And I used to love it. He'd play it every day there was the rock disco and I looked forward to it. But I didn't know who it was, yeah. I later found out by asking him that it was Def Leppard and it was taken from 1981's High and Dry album, and that then got me into the band. A bit of history of the band: they were formed in Sheffield in the UK in 1977 and it took them a while to get going in the UK, and in fact their first major success came in the USA with that song that I was just talking about, Bringing on the Heartbreak. In 1982 it was a single and a video just at the time that MTV was starting to take a hold in the USA, and it got a good lot of airplay on MTV and on the radio, and it really started to boost Leppard's career. Back in Europe and the UK, they really just couldn't seem to get a foothold, despite what had been two excellent albums to start off their career. Then came 1983 and the release of this album, Pyromania. Their career in America shot off like a rocket. Today this album has sold over 10 million copies in the USA. And their follow-up album in 1987, Hysteria, was even more massive. And now by that time in the UK the band had started to get a lot more interest. But in America they were absolutely huge, and it wasn't really until Hysteria that the UK really started to sit up and take notice when the Animal single was released. They carried on, they had continued their success throughout the 80s and into the early 90s, and then boom, like a rocket, like for many of the rock and metal bands at the time, the grunge era took a hold and their career took a dip. But in more recent times it's re-established itself, so much so that they're a co-headliner on a stadium tour that they're due to undertake with Motley Crue, maybe this year, maybe next year, who knows, because of COVID. And hopefully it's a tour that will go around the world. It'd be nice to see Crue and Leppard again, but for you lucky people in America, go and enjoy yourselves. So today I am going to be featuring this album, Pyromania, from 1983. Well, this is a brilliant album. It was the second album that they had Mutt Lange as their producer, a very famous producer who had been involved with many big albums, most noticeably with AC/DC's Back in Black. He had this brilliant ability to be able to create almost like pop songs out of the rock and well, the rock bands really. He didn't really get involved with metal bands. And it's fair to say, and Def Leppard will admit this, he played a major part not only in being a producer, but as a songwriter and an arranger for these songs. And what a brilliant job he does. I mean, it's almost impossible to choose just 4 tracks from this album as my favorite 4. As I always do when I feature an album, I'm going to pick my favorite 4 tracks. This is very, very difficult. And it's one of those albums where, ask me tomorrow, it might be a little bit different again in terms of the 4 that I choose. Another interesting point about this album as well is, although this is considered one of their harder rock albums, when we get to Hysteria and some of the later albums, there's even more polish applied and more pop sensibilities there. This is still considered one of their harder edge albums. And the sound, yeah, it comes across as a real rock, bombastic sound. But it's amazing how many keyboards are used on this album. The album is just full of keyboards, but the keyboards are very carefully used so that in a lot of ways they sound like guitars, or even as they act as big multiple backups to the guitars. A prime example of this is the first track that I would choose from this album, and it is also the opening track from the album, Rock Rock Till You Drop. And it starts with this big ding ding, which if you listen very carefully, although it at first appears like guitars, it's actually a lot of keyboards coming through there as this big introduction. And in fact, the person who is noted as playing the keyboards on here, there's a guy who is known as something the Boffin, T. Boffin. Now actually, that was just a name that was used for the album, because the guy who did a lot of the keyboards on this album is a guy by the name of Thomas Dolby. Now, the reason why they hid his name is because Thomas Dolby was very much a pop star, and I think a lot of the rock fans would have been up in arms if it's like, "Why, what are you doing with a pop guy on a rock album?" Especially in the UK. We were very sensitive to these kind of things. And that's one of the problems that Def Leppard had, is that by bringing in Mutt Lange and creating almost like these pop rock songs, at the time in the UK, it took a while for the fans to get into that. I think as some of the American bands then came along with your Bon Jovi, your Motley Crue, Poison, Rat, Cinderella, all who were doing that kind of style of music, then it became more acceptable for the UK fans to hear it from a UK band. And I certainly think that's one of the reasons why it took a while for Def Leppard's career in the UK to kick off. The next track that I will choose from this album, and in fact, let me just show you this album a little bit more. Amazing front cover. I love the artwork on this cover, and you'll see that this is a red vinyl version. They've recently remastered their albums yet again. They've remastered them several times. This recent remastering was done for vinyl and for CDs. And this is a lovely red vinyl copy of the album, and it sounds fantastic. It really does. It's if you're into vinyl and you don't have this, pick it up. You will not be disappointed. Even though Hysteria is a fantastic album and will certainly feature on a future episode of Greatest Rock and Metal, this really, bang, jumps out of the speakers with that real raw, you can say this, a raw, polished rock sound. Does that make sense? Well, that's what this album has, in my opinion. The next track that I will choose is Too Late for Love. I love the vocals on this song, and again, that's one of the things that Def Leppard are known for, their brilliant harmony vocals that they do, and Too Late for Love is a classic example of that. It starts off almost balladesque, and then it kicks in with the dan-dan-dan-dan-dan. Brilliant guitar riff, brilliant guitar riff. Also worth mentioning as a fascinating fact, the original, one of the original guitarists for Def Leppard was a guy by the name of Pete Willis. But he started to have a lot of problems with alcohol and was kind of on his way out of the band. And by the recording of this album, he did lay down a lot of the guitar tracks, but in the end, the band suggested by the producer as well that, look, Pete just wasn't going to make it, they needed a new guitar player. So in comes a guy by the name of Phil Collen, the guy who today never wears a shirt on stage. What is he, 60 years old maybe, or nearly 60, still got the figure of a 20-year-old man. Mental. Anyway, so Phil Collen comes in and he does some brilliant guitar solos on this album. Yeah, Too Late for Love, the second track I will choose. Third track, Foolin', Foolin'. Great song. I love the Foolin' part to the chorus. Another big rock song. Great riff to it, and like all the tracks on here, there isn't a track that you can fault. They've all got brilliant riffs, brilliant choruses, superb musicianship and vocals. The last track I will choose is quite an epic track. Def Leppard always seem to put at least one epic 5-6 minute long song on their albums. In fact, Def Leppard, Led Zeppelin, their name was inspired by Led Zeppelin, and on nearly every album they have a Led Zeppelin type epic track. On this album they actually have two, but the one I'm going to choose is Die Hard the Hunter. Now, on a recent Blu-ray and album that is from a residency that they did in Las Vegas, you'll see it down here, Def Leppard Hits Vegas, they actually resurrect Die Hard the Hunter back into the set, and it sounds brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's such a shame. I understand why bands like Def Leppard, these heritage bands, go out there and most of the time just play a greatest hits show and maybe throwing one deep cut. I think they could get away with changing the balance a little bit, some of these heritage bands, and maybe do 80%, 75-80% of the greatest hits and 25% the deep cuts, because I think even the casual fan that's going to see Def Leppard on a regular basis, I think even they would like a little bit of a mix up in the set list than every couple of years going out there and seeing pretty much the same set with just a different light show and production around them. Something to think about. That's my opinion anyway. So there you have it, the brilliant Pyromania album, untouchable. For me, it is the best Def Leppard album. There's great arguments that could be put forward for other albums, but this is the number one for me. Okay, let's take a little bit of a break and have a look at Rock T-shirts by the Sea. Okay, so let's go way back to 1986. And the first time that I saw Def Leppard live. And it was on kind of still the Pyromania tour. But in fact they were taking a break from, they really officially finished the Pyromania tour. And they were taking a break from recording their Hysteria album at the time. And now, what was also interesting about this was that this was to be the comeback for drummer Rick Allen. A few months earlier, he'd been involved in a devastating car crash, and as a result, as many of you will know by now, he lost his arm. But he'd found a way to drum with one arm. He'd incorporated electronics into his drum kit. And Def Leppard at that time were, as I said earlier about the keyboards, they were very much at the forefront of using electronics in music. They didn't shy away from it. So Matt Langer and some engineers helped Rick Allen to develop this electronic drum kit that he could use with just the one arm. And they were doing a short festival tour. They'd done some warm-up gigs in Ireland prior to the festival tour, but they were doing a short festival tour to get Rick Allen back into the feel of things again. And there I was, 1986, this is the ticket, the Donington Monsters of Rock Festival, and as you will see, the headliner that day was Ozzy Osbourne. There's the shirt from the show. And Def Leppard were, I think they were third on the bill, I seem to remember. And, sorry about that. In fact, let's just take a quick look at the shirt. Yeah, now, what's interesting about this shirt? This wasn't the first time this had happened with the Donington shirts. I think they were printed way in advance of the festival, because as you can see, Def Leppard don't appear on the bill. Now this also happened in 1984. The shirts from 1984 didn't have Ozzy on them, even though he actually played the gig. And although I don't have the official reason, I'm going to suspect that at this time they weren't 100% sure if Leppard were going to play or not. And it got to the point, well, we got to print the shirts, so they did. But yeah, they were third on the bill. Ozzy, as you can see, was the headliner. Scorpion second on the bill, and actually Def Leppard were third, just above Motorhead. And then we have Bad News, the joke heavy metal band put together by a comic strip TV show, and Warlock, Doro Pesch's Warlock. So, the big comeback show for Rick Allen, and what a show it was. Even though they were third on the bill, this was the start, in my opinion, of really Def Leppard making some noise, so to speak, in the UK. The reaction to their set that day was phenomenal, and now at last the UK was opening their arms to a British rock band and their success. Most of the set list was made up of tracks from the Pyromania album. We had 5 tracks from the album: Rock Rock Till You Drop, Rock of Ages, Stage Fright, and Too Late for Love, and of course Photograph. Now you might be wondering, why did I not choose Photograph as one of my top 4? It was their big hit single from the album. Just because, like I said, it's almost impossible to choose just 4 from that album. So they played 5 tracks from Pyromania. They played a couple of tracks from High and Dry. We got Let It Go, and what was the other one? Hit and Run. And then from the debut album On Through the Night, we had Wasted. There was also a cover song. They did Travelling Band, which is a Creedence Clearwater song. I don't know why they did a cover song. there's so many great extra tracks they could have taken from, one more track from the debut album. Why stick a cover song in when you're doing a support set? It wasn't a track that they recorded before, to my knowledge. Certainly not on any of the albums anyway. Whether it had been a B-side, I don't know about that. So, but anyway, it didn't disappoint. Now, what was also interesting is that they also played 2 tracks from the then unreleased Hysteria album. We got Love and Affection, a ballad, and Run Riot. Unusual tracks to have picked. They're not 2 of the tracks that are considered standout tracks from the Hysteria album, so quite an unusual choice to have played those 2. But it was nice to hear a couple of tracks from a forthcoming album. But really, the standout moment of that day, and a day that is still spoken about by the band themselves, was the reaction when just before Rock of Ages, that Joe Elliott introduced Rick Allen to the crowd. It was a massive roar of encouragement and appreciation for Rick Allen being back behind the drum kit. Emotional moment for the band, emotional moment for the crowd to have seen what this guy achieved and still achieves today is a phenomenal inspiration for others in terms of overcoming adversity. So respect to you, Mr. Rick Allen. Even though you'll never see this, my respect goes out to you anyway. So there you have it. For me, what a start to seeing Def Leppard live. Very lucky to have been there at that, and that was my first of many live Def Leppard gigs. So there you have it. That's my thoughts on the Pyromania album and the tour. I hope you enjoyed that. Please press the red button to subscribe to the channel. It's free and it's easy to do. And as always, I'll leave you with what I consider my top 4 Def Leppard albums. And of course, Pyromania, Hysteria, which runs it a very close second for me, and running Hysteria a very close third, the High and Dry album. And then it starts to get quite tough. We've got albums like Adrenalize, which is a great album. There's the debut album On Through the Night. There's their more recent album, just titled Def Leppard, another strong contender. And an album that I forgot to put here, Euphoria. Is another album that I really like, but I'm going to give it to the 4th one that I would pick. It's going to be the debut album, On Through the Night. That's when they really were just what I call a meat and potato rock band, and there's some brilliant tracks on there. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, remember, we rock!